The Nikon Z5 has arrived with shipping beginning at the end of April 2025, with a launch price of $1696.95 and a feature set on par with other cameras that are much more expensive. It certainly isn't coming across like the beginner full frame that everyone keeps referring to it as. We're going to talk about it. Throughout this video, you can follow this ticker up top, which will trigger every time the Nikon Z5 gave us something I wanted from my list of reasonable expectations from this video from a year prior to today's video. It will get 1 point if my expectations are met and 2 points if it exceeded my expectations. It will lose a point if it falls short of my expectations. Admittedly, I don't use half the stuff probably that modern cameras have, and I don't even come close to the full potential of what these new cameras can do. That's why I find spec talk kind of boring, but in this case, it is important because the Z5 II is kind of loaded. It's a mostly plastic and rubber body with magnesium alloy chassis, housing a 24.5 megapixel full-frame BSI CMOS sensor. Taking in that sensor information and pooping it into something we recognize as a photograph is the X-Speed 7, which we all know by now is fantastic. We get 5-axis in-body image stabilization with 14 FPS mechanical shutter and up to 30 FPS electronic, and as far as autofocus goes, it's going to be on par with the rest of the line as far as speed and accuracy goes, which is what we all wanted. Nikon needed to unify autofocus and let other features separate the models. That is the industry expectation, and we got it. With that comes a detection system that identifies humans, animals, birds, planes, bikes, and so on, which I would have been happy with just humans, dogs, and cats, but again, we are working towards a more unified AF program, and I like it. Truth is, you cannot make a camera today that doesn't have decent video features. It would be torn apart by content creators, and the marketing disaster that followed would be atomic. That said, for video, I didn't have many demands because I really wanted a photo-focused camera. So the video features are RAW recording, new for the Z5 line, improvements in internal recording modes such as 1080, 120, so a little slow-mo action is now here. We do still get a crop in 4K 60 of 1.5, but not in 30p, which is a significant improvement over the Z5, which had a 1.7 crop in 4K 30. So the Z5 II, it's just better than the Z5 everywhere in video, really. Look up more improvements in this respect if you want. I should state that the two things we lost points on were the forced crop in video and no more shutter. But I made it clear that I understand that some things just aren't possible at certain price points. I mentioned those expectations knowing that there has to be separating factors. I reversed the -1 point for the forced crop because, again, I wanted a photo-focused camera and we got it, but I also hate forced crop, and this is forced in 60p, but at least it's improved in 30p. That's all I want to say on it. The improvements over the Z5 don't even stop there. We get slightly higher megapixels, not that you'll ever notice a difference because it's 24.5 in the Z5 II and 24.3 in the Z5, and also an increased native ISO to 64,000 from the Z5's 51,200. I doubt the vast majority of people will ever be that high though. It's still 100 ISO where it matters to me on both cameras. Noise performance, however, should be better with that BSI sensor. Moving on, we do get a little more than double the resolution on the rear screen, which is now flippy instead of tilting, which I would have preferred the tilting type. And we also get an improvement in image stab to -7.5 stops compared to the Z5's -5. So Nikon definitely did more in the Z5 II than I thought they needed to. So I don't want to hear any complaints about the launch price. Factoring in the inflation we've been seeing and even tossing that out, just what the camera is, it's a really good value. Consider the use cases. This camera can do everything for the 2% of photographers and does more than enough for 98% of the consumer's needs. Sure, the Z6 II wins out in video, but for stills, whether you're a working or hobbyist photographer, I have a really hard time not seeing this as the only option if 24 megapixels is your jam. As a backup stills camera for someone rocking a Z8 or a Z9, sure, but also just any stills shooter switching to Nikon mirrorless or someone starting photography in full frame. I have a hard time making the Z6 III make sense for $800 more. Now, some will say that Nikon shot its own foot making such a capable stills camera for $800 less. However, I argue this is exactly what I've been wanting to see from a brand. That is, specs that make your shopping selections obvious. Now that Nikon has more or less unified autofocus across the line, we have a cut and dry product line that is so simple that to me it has an appeal like this. Z5 II, still shooters. Z6 III, video shooters. Z8, jack of all trades. Z9, flagship. There are still gaps there. That's a subject for another time, so subscribe so you don't miss it. But if an absolute newbie first-time buyer can't get that kind of marketing message, then they've never earned their own money and have been blindly buying stuff their whole life. It is so simple that way. Cameras have gotten so advanced that people are in my comments all the time with the nuanced factors that are holding them from deciding this from that. To me, the least expensive full-frame Nikon mirrorless being as capable as the Z5 II is, it just made everything more simple, and I'm here for it. So is the Z5 II in my future? Here's the thing. Probably not, because I have too many cameras. I'm actually getting rid of the Z6 III because it doesn't have a job to do anymore. If my YouTube went away, I'd probably just have the Z9 and be fine, because I don't even need a secondary camera outside of YouTube. I keep the Z8 around just in case I decide to pick up paid work again. But really, that's it. That's all I need. However, I am a huge fan of this particular place in the market. A highly capable camera in the realm of the entry to full frame, which I don't really like that phrase anyway, but that particular category in the product line is incredibly important because it saves money for 98% of consumers, both pro and hobbyists. I'm a D610 kid. I had one not just because it's the one I could afford, but rather because the D750 didn't offer me anything else that I needed for the cost increase. I know firsthand the importance of this territory in the market. The Z5, as far as a mirrorless goes, was in that pocket for still shooters, but at the cost of much slower FPS. So as it relates to mirrorless, maybe 80% of consumer needs were filled. It definitely wasn't a super solid choice for sports or quick wildlife. The Z5 II kind of is. We can't compare mirrorless to DSLR on basic function because they are just vastly different, but we can look at something like the D610 versus D750 and see the differences were kind of minor. Then look at the Z5 and the Z6 II and the Z6 III and see that the differences were much greater. The Z5 II versus the Z6 III, to me, it is that easy decision territory like the D610 and D750. I just hope there are enough still shooters out there that were still trying to save money for the Z6 III, but weren't quite there yet, because you're about to save a bunch of money. Just get the Z5 II. So the Z5 II is not in my future for ownership, but since I'm such a huge fan of the Z5 and this particular sector in the market, and so are many of my subscribers clear by my video counts on the Z5, I will get one borrowed and do some stuff with it. But that costs real money. YouTube ain't paying me that much. And so if you want to help out with that, you can check out my presets at zwadephoto.com/digital products, or you can subscribe and become a member of the channel to get all of my content early and get member-only content. And you can use the other links in the description to buy your Z5 II or other camera products, and I'll get a 2% commission if you do so. I'm Z Wade, the Z Wade in Z Wade Photo. Stay sharp, YouTube.